Welcome to the CEO Shift Show, helping specialized service business owners build a business that runs without them. I'm Carol Surbey, and today we're going to get into something that comes up in almost every single coaching conversation I have with specialized service operators. You're good at what you do. Your client sees it. They comment on it, and they say things like, "We never thought of that," or "Nobody else caught that." And then they tell a friend, eventually. But here's the thing I want you to sit with today. If your expertise only becomes visible when a client is already standing in front of you, you're invisible to your market. Today we're going to unpack that with a real client story that makes the problem impossible for you to ignore. A concrete framework for diagnosing your own authority gap, and the one shift that separates specialized service businesses that build reputations from ones that stay dependent on word of mouth forever. Let's go. Here's what I want to put on the table before we get into Frank's story. Most specialized service business owners are not invisible because they lack expertise. They're invisible because their expertise is not systematically visible before a client chooses them. There is a version of you that exists in your client's mind before you ever meet. That version is formed by your website, your intake process, your responsiveness, the emails you send before you show up, and the reviews left by your last clients, the way your proposal looks. That version, whether you build it intentionally or not, is what determines whether you get the job at full price or whether you're the third quote they're comparing. Authority is not something you earn in a conversation. It's something that you build before the conversation even happens. So Frank understood this eventually, but it took him a while to see the gap because the referrals were working until they stopped being enough. So Frank runs a painting and specialty services company in Eastern Canada. He's been in the trades long enough to know things that newer contractors miss. And his clients, well, they know it. His work is excellent. The feedback is consistent. He gets referrals. From the outside, it looks like a functioning business. And in many ways, it is. But here's what was happening underneath the surface. Every single prospect who called Frank started from scratch. They didn't know what to expect from the process. They didn't know how Frank operated, or what made him different, or why his price was what it was before he showed up to the quote. They just knew someone said, "Call this guy." And so Frank would show up to the estimate. He'd walk through the project. He'd identify the things homeowners hadn't noticed. Hidden issues, prep work that other contractors were skipping, considerations that would affect the outcome in 6 months. He'd then present the estimate, and then he'd hear it. "Well, we never thought of that." That sentence, he heard it all the time. He knew it was valuable. He knew it was what made him different. But it was only coming out of his mouth during the estimates. It was not reaching his clients before they called. It was not visible to anyone who hadn't already hired him or been referred by someone who had. His expertise was real. His authority was invisible. And there was a second problem underneath that one. Because Frank's intake process was almost entirely manual. Someone would call or fill out a form. He'd respond when he got to it. He'd schedule an estimate. He'd show up. Sometimes they book. Sometimes they say they need to think about it. Sometimes he'd never hear from them again. He was solely competing on price and proximity and the luck of the referral. He wasn't competing on demonstrated expertise. And he didn't have a system that would change that. What I want you to notice about Frank's situation is that this was not a skills gap. He had the knowledge, he had the insight, and he had the exact differentiation that would make him the obvious choice in this market if clients could see it before the estimate. The scenario I just described, showing up to an estimate as your first real introduction to a client, it's the norm in this space. Environmental testing, restoration, specialty cleaning, compliance and inspection, painting and coatings. The businesses run on referrals. The work speaks for itself. And the authority feels like something that builds over time through reputation. And that logic makes sense, right up to the point where it stops holding. Referral-based authority has a ceiling. And when your growth depends on what your last client says to their neighbor, you're not controlling your market position. You're at the mercy of timing, memory, and whether the person who was impressed by your work just happens to know someone who needs you this month. And here's something that surprises most owners when I put it this way. The visibility gap does not announce itself loudly. It shows up as close rate inconsistency. A great month followed by a quiet one. Prospects who get your quote and then go dark. Jobs where you showed up, did excellent work, and still lost to a lower bid. You assume it's price sensitivity. You assume the market is competitive. What you don't see is that you are being evaluated before you ever arrive, based on what the client could find out about you, your intake process, your communication, and what the pre-estimate experience told them about how you operate. And if that pre-estimate experience communicates nothing, you're starting every sale from zero. So Frank's business wasn't struggling because he wasn't good at what he did. He was excellent. But excellent work, when it's delivered silently, is indistinguishable from average work in the eyes of a prospect who has not yet seen it. Authority has to reach the client before the estimate. That's the truth this episode is built around today. If I had walked into Frank's business and was asked to build an authority infrastructure from the ground up, here's what I would have built first. First thing I would have done is map the authority footprint. What does a prospect see when they're trying to decide whether to call you? That means the website, the Google reviews, the intake process, the response time, and critically, what happens after they make first contact. For most specialized service operators, the honest answer is not much. They see a website that explains what you do, maybe some reviews, and then silence. until the estimate. It's not an authority footprint. That's a directory listing. An authority footprint is intentional. It communicates your expertise, your process, your standards, and your values before you ever knock at the door. It makes the prospect feel like they already know how you operate and why that matters. The second thing I would have built is a pre-sell sequence. Frank had the insight in his head. He just wasn't getting it to the client before the estimate. So the first operational move was to build a series of emails that go out automatically after the prospect books an estimate. Not to sell, but to demonstrate. An email introducing what to expect from the process. An email explaining what he looks for that other contractors may miss. An email addressing the questions most clients don't know to ask until after the job is done. So by the time Frank shows up to a quote, the client has already experienced his expertise. They've read it, they've thought about it, and they arrived at the estimate expecting to hire someone who thinks differently. That sequence does not change what Frank does on the site. It changes what the client brings to the conversation, and it changes the category Frank is in before the first handshake. The third thing I would have built is the expertise signal. Frank's differentiation. The things he notices that other contractors miss. This needed to exist in a place clients could find before they hired him. So that means reviews that describe that specific quality, not just great work, would recommend. It means a short piece of content that walks through the things most homeowners don't know to ask their contractor. It means a documented checklist in the proposal that visually demonstrates the depth of his process. Your expertise signal is not your ego. It's the mechanism by which clients understand why you are worth the price before they hear your number. Frank said something in one of our sessions that I keep coming back to. He said that the clients kept saying, "We never thought of that." And he kept hearing it. And what he didn't know was how to actually make that his brand. That is the gap where most specialized service businesses are versus where they could be. The insight is there. The differentiation is there. The clients are already experiencing it. What is missing is the system that puts that expertise in front of the client before they're standing in the room with you. And your expertise doesn't build authority. The way you show up does. So here's your challenge for this week. And I want to be clear, this week, not someday, this week. Step number 1, audit your authority footprint. What does a prospect see from the moment they find you until the moment you arrive at their door? Write that down. Every touch point. And then ask yourself, does this communicate expertise or does it just communicate your availability? Step number 2, identify your best insight. What is the thing you notice that other contractors in your space miss? The thing that makes clients say, we never thought of that. Write it down. That is the seed of your authority content. Step number 3, build one visibility touchpoint this week. One email in the pre-sale sequence. One Google review response that demonstrates your expertise. One post that walked your audience through how you think about your work. One thing that puts your insight in front of a prospect before the estimate. Visibility without a system is not a strategy. It's a hope. What you're building this month is the infrastructure that makes your expertise visible. Systematically, repeatably, whether you're personally reaching out that week or not. And if you're ready to build that infrastructure, the visibility and thought leadership tools are available at the scalableCEOacademy.com. 8 tools built around the authority gap we've been talking about today. And if you want coaching support to install it, book a 30-minute discovery call at carolsurbey.com. I'm Carol Surbey. Build a business that runs without you with systems that scale.